people are uncomfortable talking about race. It makes them, squirm. They don't want, because it's very in your face. And so that's, I think, one of or behind the curtain, I should say, when it comes to America. Like, until we deal with that, we're not going to be where we need to be.
Welcome to the Networking with Michelle podcast, the show dedicated to providing you with life strategies with a little bit of entrepreneur advice. Here we believe in the Jim Rohn quote, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Hey everyone, today's special guest is Mr. Ray Shackelford, Southern Regional Vice President of the Urban League and a dear friend of mine, an HBLI classmate. Ray, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I feel like there should be applause or something. I don't know. I felt like that sound effect was coming, but I'm doing well, Michelle. I'm good. Glad to be on the show.
Finally.
Yes, finally. This has been, how long has this been in the making?
Two?
Don't say 2 years. I'll say a year. Don't do me like that. But yeah, it's long overdue. We'll just say that.
All right. So I don't even know where to begin because I don't want to shortchange the people because I know you so well. But
man, we could begin at the beginning. It was June 26, 1986. I believe it was a stormy night. But no, I don't know. It's actually raining outside, I think. But I don't know where you want to start. There's a lot of ground to cover. I know you said you want to talk about community. You want to talk about leadership. So I guess.
What's your background, education, professional experience, community experience, all that stuff?
Okay, let's see. So, born and raised in Houston, native Houstonian, 3rd Ward. Grew up in 3rd Ward, Willow Avenue Baptist Church. Went to Lamar High School, Eagle Scout, then went off to Morehouse College. I majored in business administration, minored in finance. Minored in economics. Came back home, taught school, my first job out of school. Didn't know what I wanted to do. So I taught math 6th through 8th grade, all boys school, HAULYP TSU. That was a very interesting time in my life. And still to this day, I think that was probably one of my toughest jobs, but grew a lot from that experience. And I actually started coaching at Rice University for this youth impact program they had in partnership with the NFL. And then for a period, I was actually unemployed for almost about a year. And I was studying for my GMAT, my LSAT. So this is back in like 2009. Man, I'm getting old. And so then from there, I started working full-time at the Houston Area Urban League. Okay. And started going to graduate school at night at the University of Houston to get my MBA. And I worked at the Urban League in the housing department as a certified housing counselor doing case management at that time for the Homeless Prevention and Rapid Rehousing Program. And from there, that was about a 3-year period where I was there. Got my MBA, focused on business consulting. And once I graduated, I started looking at different opportunities. And actually, I think this was around the time you and I started getting close, because this was like 2013, around that time. And I had turned down a job with AT&T. And this was around the time you bamboozled me and got me to run for vice president of operations with Black NBA. And I was already vice president of the Houston Area Urban League Young Professionals. And so, yeah, that was, again, very interesting. It turned out to be a positive thing.
I think I owe you a steak.
Something.
I think I owe you a steak dinner.
Lamb. But yeah, and so, but it was beneficial because I ended up getting my next job, my first job out of graduate school in conjunction with Black NBA at that conference. So I left the Urban League, started working for Coca-Cola, doing business development. Did that for about 18 to 20 months. And then I transitioned to Grainger. I got that job in conjunction with National Sales Network and started doing account management. And that was all the way up until this year, actually. So been in sales for about 5 years. And I left Grainger, we had a mutual separation, I should say, on January 1st. And I actually started running for office. I started a campaign.
Wow.
Running for Harris County Justice of the Peace, Precinct 7, Place 2, and started working part-time for Southwest Airlines doing operations. And this season of my life, that campaign, that was very interesting. A lot of interesting things in my life, and we can dive more into that. But did not make it to the runoff in that race. It was 4 opponents. I was the last one to file, last one to announce. I ended up getting 21% of the vote. Around, it was like 4,790 people voted for me, which is just crazy in itself. And I raised about $30,000 in 6 weeks, and I missed the runoff by like 3%. Mm-hmm. So from that, I've had a lot of people reach out to me about running for different offices, city council, another justice of the peace seat, state legislature. And so just kind of evaluating those things. But along that trajectory or my professional endeavors, a lot of my time has been spent doing community things. So Urban League Young Professionals, serving as a social and cultural chair initially, then becoming the vice president, ultimately becoming the president, and now Southern Region vice president. And I also served on the board for the Houston Area Urban League and gone through a few leadership programs. You and I went through the Houston Black Leadership Institute together. Shout out to the founders, EA, Uncle E, Tanisha, Mike, NULYP. NULYP is the truth. Just for you guys that don't know, just Google him. NULYP Armand.
And Elijah?
Uncle E, that's what I call him.
Oh, okay, my bad.
And yeah, so doing that work has allowed me to grow a lot as a leader and as a person. It challenges you a great deal when you're trying to lead your peers and encourage them to get involved in the community, and not just your peers, but individuals who in some cases are much older than me. Mm. And they may have thought I was older because of my beard and the voice, but I'm only 32. Well, not yet. God willing, I'll make it in the next month. Yeah. So doing that work, Black MBA. Now I'm also a board member for Emerging 100. Serve as a parliamentarian, and also serving on the Independent Police Oversight Board for the city of Houston. Been doing that for almost 3 years now. So I guess I'm pretty sure we probably skipped over some things, but that's a brief synopsis of professional and community, how we've gotten to this point.
So when did you discover your leadership qualities? Like, what was that first? I mean, I know you mentioned the Boy Scouts, but was there a time that you're like, I got this? Are you just immersed immediately? So
I guess the thing is, my pops used to like make me do a lot of leadership stuff. He's bigger than me. Mm-hmm. Well, he was bigger than me then. So he could, make me do stuff. Love you, Dad. And I don't know. There was always people just kind of responded to me in that capacity. I was someone who, even when I think back, even in football, I was the captain on the team. Mm-hmm. I was the one that would always lead the huddles before games, get everybody hyped up. But I think there was kind of a light bulb moment when I went off, when I came back from school, because I went off to Morehouse. And because my father had made me do so much from a leadership standpoint, I didn't want to do anything in college. I just wanted to exist. I was like, let me just go to school and just be. Mm-hmm. And when I came home, I was teaching, I was making good money. I didn't have any bills because I was still staying with my parents. So I was just blowing through money. And my mom was just like, you need to find something else to do. Cause I was 22. It was young Ray was out here wilding. And so, I think it was like April of 2009, I joined the Young Professionals. And when I started getting back in that community space and getting active with the Urban League and, getting in leadership, and again, just kind of seeing how people responded to me, it was just something internally that I just kind of knew this is where I'm supposed to be. And I've just continued to grow and embrace that. And it's led me to a lot of great things, not just through the Urban League, but just in life. When you kind of find that calling, it's not to say that every day is a good day. You got your ebbs and flows, but the overall direction has been very positive.
Now, I know when we're in college or early on in our corporate career, like we see and we hear about the corporate ladder, right? When you got involved on the community development, community organizations, did you see a pathway for that? Or because you come a long ways. I mean, and you've been involved with multiple organizations and boards at the same time. And then you have definitely progressed through the Urban League specifically.
Absolutely. I mean, the corporate component, I saw a pathway for that. It just honestly wasn't something that, at least to date, the things that are presented to me, it wasn't for me. I've gotten awards with my different organizations, being in sales with my sales organizations. I've been number one, been in the top 5, etc. It just was not, I knew that wasn't for me. I know it's not for me. And you and I were talking about this earlier. You know, it's one of those things where just because I'm good at it doesn't necessarily mean that's where I'm supposed to be, in my opinion. Because I'm sure you have a lot of different fields of thought on that. And it was definitely a serious consideration, because for me, it's about how can I make the biggest impact in our communities. When you're talking about people of color, African Americans specifically, people within diaspora, trying to move us forward, especially me being from 3rd Ward, reaching back to those areas. How can I make the biggest impact in my neighborhood, in my city, with my people? And for me, corporate was just not the answer right now. And so as a result, I feel like that's why I've always leaned more towards the community things. That's always been where my passion lies. Those are things I've always done on a volunteer basis. I don't have to get paid to do those things, because that is what I enjoy doing. That is where I know I'm meant to be, and I thrive in that space.
What is your role as Southern Regional VP for the Urban League?
So as Southern Region Vice President, I am responsible for the largest region within the National Urban League Young Professionals. And I have right now about 22 chapters I'm responsible for, which makes up more than a third of the chapters across the country. And I'm charged with providing leadership and guidance to those presidents over those chapters. It's kind of like a coaching / consulting type role. There's different levels of presidents. And so I have to meet them where they are. You have some presidents that are veterans. They come up through the movement with me. They don't need the same type of direction or guidance. And then I have some that are brand new in the movement. And, you know, I got to kind of walk them through every step. And then I'm also there sometimes as a counselor, like sounding board. They may just want to vent. They're going through some different things in their leadership journey, and they just need somebody just to talk to. And I've been there as a president. It gets rough. There are some days where you just really are frustrated, maybe with your team, some of the things that you're dealing with in your environment, in your city, trying to get the work done. And you just need somebody there for you. And in addition to that, just continuing to be an example and provide pretty much, I guess, my stories to them so that they can learn from it and use it for themselves. And best practices that I learned when I was a president. I was fortunate enough to be fairly successful because I had a very good team. And one of my teammates, she's now Jasmine Turner, she's finishing up her 2nd term as president. She was a large part of my success. And so I was just very fortunate in that respect. But that's essentially what I do as Southern Region Vice President, and also obviously contribute to the national leadership team as it relates to different things with the strategy and overall direction of the organization under the guidance of our president, Carlos Clinton.
Okay. And for those that don't know, what is the Urban League and what does the Urban League do?
Yes, the Urban League, the National Urban League, was established in 1910. Originally focusing primarily on housing, jobs, and education, specifically with Black people. If you think back to that time period, where we were in the world, this is pre-Voting Rights Act, Jim Crow, not that far removed from slavery. And so as a result, the Urban League was there to try and provide some type of equity to African Americans, to get them in a position to where they had an opportunity to be successful. And if you move forward 50 years ago, because we're celebrating 50 years, the Houston Area Urban League was established in 1968. So under the National Urban League, you have affiliates all over the country, about 100, probably a little bit over 100. And these are the actual nonprofits that are in the cities doing programs, whether it's, within housing, education, workforce. These are things they provide to the community at little to no cost, or I should say sponsored, because it's not free. There's a cost. Just somebody covers it for the community. And being a resource for people. The only thing that's kind of changed is it's not just focused on Black people today. It definitely still serves Black people. It's more based on the underserved, those people who don't have a voice. It's just because we're still not where we need to be from an equity standpoint. A lot of the people that the Urban League still serves, in some cases, some cities, are still Black people. Now, under that, you have two auxiliaries, two volunteer organizations. The Young Professionals, which is ages 21 to 40, they support the Urban League through volunteerism, advocacy, and fundraising. And you also have the Guild, which is 40 and up. But they're also trying to change that, trying to say you can join the Guild when you're younger, because, we always said those are our seasoned saints. But they in some cities are making it a younger organization. So like Atlanta is a very good example of that. Their Guild is very young, and they've been doing some very positive things. And so that's, I guess, very briefly what the Urban League movement is. So,
yeah, great organization. I know it definitely allowed me to come into my own when I was transitioning, because I was in that spot between right before going to grad school, finally getting an ideal corporate job at the time. I was oblivious. I think this is exactly what I want. Right. No, but it definitely helped shape me in so many areas and provided me opportunities. While serving on the board, helped me launch my business before what I had planned for myself. So always grateful for the service that it has, that I've been able to benefit from. Now, you mentioned running for office, and I'm very curious. Although you're mature, still young, say you're 32 or will be 32.
Right.
When you were running for office, was there any hesitation when it came to your age, social media? Just there's a negative stereotype as a millennial, Did any of that stuff play into you when you were getting all your stuff together?
So specific to my age, I wouldn't say there was any hesitation regarding that. It was just more about, is this the right time? As I've gotten older, I'm much more strategic in terms of how I move. And so I prayed probably about a month before I was even comfortable with making that decision. So I shouldn't say that age was a factor. It was just about this time in my life, was it the right time? Social media, I guess when you ask, was that a consideration from what vantage point?
Well, I think sometimes people feel like I can't do this, right? Like whatever that may be. And lots of times it's not even you, but it's the people, your peers that you're surrounded by that may be taking pictures. We've seen the stories, teachers on vacation.
Oh, okay.
Just the ignorance that you can't be yourself during downtime.
So that definitely played a role from the standpoint of, once you decide to run for office, you're putting yourself out there.
Exactly.
And so your life, to an extent, is no longer just yours. And I guess that's part of public service, is that there's sacrifice. Your life, some components of your life now are tied to the constituents, the people that you're serving.
Right.
And so as a result, you do have to be mindful of that. So that definitely did play a factor. There's nothing I've put out there that I was just like, hey, I need to be worried about this. And I'm not concerned about being myself because, I mean, at the end of the day, and especially I feel like in this age, people are coming to terms more with even politicians or people in public office. They're still people.
Yeah.
And so I think they appreciate, you know, seeing that you do have a real life beyond what it is that you do in public service. And I mean, all of my platforms are fairly consistent in terms of what you see. I mean, you see my family, you see some of my friends, my frat brothers, different events that I may be at, me supporting people, and then stuff I just do in the community. And that's not, you know,
that's your everyday life.
I'm about to say, that's not this facade or anything. You see my daughter on there occasionally. You see my nephew. Like, that's my life. No, you're not going to see pictures of me like at a day party or in the clubs. That's not to say I may not do those things periodically. It's just for what?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely something you have to be mindful of. It was a factor. And I feel like there was something else you asked in that question. You talked about the age, the social media, and something else being a factor. And I cannot remember that third part. But that's okay. Millennials. You were talking
the
about
stereotype.
That. We'd have to have a whole podcast on that because I have this conversation with my parents, with other individuals that are in different generations that I look up to or mentors, etc. Millennials get a bad rap
for no reason.
Yeah, man, and it is the most irritating thing in the world, and I definitely have a chip on my shoulder as it relates to that because we get just typecast and just painted with such a broad brush, and it's millennial. The generation is so broad in itself. They've even started to, I think, rename different factions within that because they're seeing that it's not as simple as saying millennials do this, millennials do that. No, because I'm a millennial about to be 32, but you have some millennials who are like 20 years old.
Right.
And the things they do and have done are completely different from me. I grew up 80s, 90s. They grew up 90s, 2000s. You know, that's very, very different. The influences, the things we're exposed to. So that, I shouldn't say that was so much a factor. It was because a lot of people don't even view me as a millennial, to be quite honest. Most people don't even know how old I am. So they're going to get I guess a surprise on the podcast. Like, oh, he's only, because people think I'm much older based on how I carry myself, the things I do in the community, etc. But so no, I shouldn't say that was a consideration as it relates to public office. It's just definitely something that we have to continue to fight through in terms of being labeled and just being kind of unfairly put in this box that doesn't necessarily apply to all of us. So,
yeah, I mean, I know you, and I could be biased, but
you are biased.
I am,
but that's okay when it comes to me.
But I mean, I think, we're, me, you, as well as our peers, like we're good examples of millennials, but I think it's more so the others, right? The others, other generations, possibly other candidates, because they're older, that regardless of what you say, it's like that red X millennial is stamped on many of us, which it can make it hard for our voice to be heard. And then possibly our actions to be carried. And I think sometimes for some people, like before we even get to that point, you know, those things can creep in our mind when it comes to like, how do I make this decision, especially with politics, right? At least when I was growing up, it was the old white man game, you know? And I definitely know that we as a Black community, we're breaking barriers when it comes to that, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. And I mean, politics is changing. And on the one hand, they're definitely in some areas is still the stereotypical white male. Mm-hmm. So if you look at Congress, House of Representatives, those areas, when you look, it's primarily still mm-hmm. white males. But as you start to look even within our city, our Harris County where we live, it's changing dramatically. And even last night, you had the young lady, forgive me, I can't remember
in Georgia.
Name, in Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
One of my Spelman sisters, she is now the Democratic candidate for governor in the state of Georgia. And so the landscape is changing. I feel like that's why you had this, I'll call good old boy resurgence under Donald Trump. Mm. It's kind of like their last stand because they realize that the landscape is changing. And so there are different pockets within the political realm that are trying to hold on to what they've known and what has kept them in power and in influence. And the reality is that's not what the future is. Like the numbers bear that out. The data bears that out. Not just within Houston. Dr. Kleinberg's done a lot of work mm-hmm. on that in terms of what this city will look like moving forward. Majority minority, African Americans, Hispanics. So the people just need to embrace it. It is what it is. And if people would be more inclusive versus trying to hold on to power and keep different factions of people on the outside, I feel like you wouldn't have as divisive a country as we have. Because when you really, for the most part, if you get to the root of what people want, they want a lot of the same things. It's just, in our country, we've had a challenge with just acknowledging certain things. So, for example, slavery happened. So stop trying to take it out of the history books. Mm-hmm. Stop trying to whitewash it. And J. Cole has this line, I think it's in the song Brackets off the album mm-hmm. KOD. If you haven't listened to that album, definitely check it out. I'm not getting paid for plugging J. Cole, but I fool with him. He has this line, I can't remember the exact words, but he says something to the effect of the man with the pen rewriting history and basically alluding to the fact that whitewashing it. And it's something that until we really acknowledge the things that took place in this country from a racial standpoint, we're not going to get to where we need to be because people just won't deal with it. If we would just address it and move forward, we could heal as a country and even as a people, because within the African-American community, we haven't dealt with it ourselves. And that's why we still have some of the challenges we have. So it's a very layered issue. It's not something that's going to be solved overnight.
What do we need to do with?
Some of us, even within our community, don't want to acknowledge that. But I have peers, and I'm not going to describe them because you might figure out who they are, mm-hmm. but they feel like we shouldn't even teach our kids about slavery. And I get, it's almost kind of like Kanye. Mm-hmm. Brother Kanye, he needs to talk to someone, a professional.
Yeah.
In his interview with Charlamagne the God, he talked about how he's been talking to some of his family, and that's cool, but he needs professional help. Because, he's saying slavery was a choice, and then you have all these people trying to back him, no, he meant this from a mental standpoint. Slavery was not a choice. Mm-hmm. And there have been different satires and skits that have come out since then. King Karan from Mo City, about basically showing and illustrating that no, slavery is not a choice. Like, oh, do I want to go work in the fields today? That's not what it was. And so even within our own communities, there are some of us who are disillusioned about what that was and how much that impacted us as a people in terms of how we do some of the things we do. When you look at the backbiting, the crab in the bucket syndrome, those individuals who were Uncle Toms or served very closely to their master. Samuel L. Jackson played that character from Django. He played the mess out that role. But you still have individuals like that. They feel like, let's, for example, say in corporate America, I get here and it's only for me to be at this level. I'm not going to help you get here. That mentality is not beneficial to anybody but you. And until we get past that, that's what I mean when I say in our community, we still have to do some healing. And even the manner in which our women were treated. When you look at during slavery, the rape culture, those are things that still manifest, how the families were torn apart, the child support system now. Like, there's a lot of different things when you really look at slavery and analyze it and break it down piece by piece. There's a lot of parallels with modern day and how we're still struggling. And some of the systems and things have been put in place in this country that continue to provide us with a lack of equity. And even just this past, was like 2 weeks ago, where they had the race and justice event with the Atlantic. They were having some of these conversations. It was supposed to be on race and justice, but they focused primarily on criminal justice. People are uncomfortable talking about race. It makes them, squirm. They don't want, because it's very in your face. And so that's, I think, one of or behind the curtain, I should say, when it comes to America. Like, until we deal with that, we're not going to be where we need to be.
I agree.
Everybody doesn't agree with me. I've had some very intense conversations with people where they just adamantly disagree. And that's fine.
I guess my concern, I just don't know where we're going to begin. And that's the part that hurts me. Like, I was talking to a colleague a couple months ago, and he's married. And I was giving him the situation where we need to get to the point where, at least within our community, where we just love and respect each other. And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, it's to the point where if I go out, just say I'm at Walgreens or something, and for whatever reason, there's a discrepancy between me and the cashier, right? And the cashier is a man and he's very disrespectful, right? And then you come out, you're like, hey, what's going on? Well, as if I didn't know you. Okay. So many of us are just standing back and watching, and I'm like, okay, but if you're a black guy, if you're my brother, I need you to step in, right? I'm not saying physical stuff. It shouldn't get that far. But it's like, I need you to step in and defend me, right? In the boardroom, if I deserve this promotion, and my name comes up, I need you to back me up, right? And I feel lots of times we reserve this love and respect for only intimate spaces, right? Like, I'm only going to protect you if you're my sister or if I have an intimate relationship with you. And I think that's hurting our culture, because I feel like if you're my brother.
You just said a word that brings up an entirely different thing. What is our culture?
Well, our community.
Okay.
Among Black people.
Okay, because the culture component, and I've had we started to have this conversation, because of all the things that we've gone through, we don't really have a consistent, that's true. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, with Africa, you know what your culture is. You know what tribe, the traditions, etc. The Hispanic culture, they come from Mexico. They come from Spain. But with us being brought over here by force and the things that have transpired over the past 400 plus years, if I ask that question, what is our culture, to 10 different people, I'm going to get 10 different answers. There may be certain things within those answers that are consistent, but overall, it's very, very different. And that's, again, going back to that conversation about race, that's part of the issue within our community. We don't have.
I don't know what it's going to take. I feel like we don't defend and protect each other, right? I feel like it's every man for themselves. And somehow, when are we going to gather? Like, when are we going to be a community? And I say community, like beyond church. When are we going to come together and unite and take action on specific things that's going to bring us up?
We haven't really done that. And this is as somebody who's younger looking back through the history books, I don't think since the Civil Rights Movement.
Mm-hmm. Too many leaders?
I don't know if it's too many leaders. Who are our leaders, though, today? I think it's both the absence of and there's too much me. Like you said, there's no sense of community. And I've had these conversations with my father and even other individuals from that time period. They feel like integration ultimately hurt us.
Yeah, I
agree. Because there was a time period where what you were talking about, the love and respect component, regardless of if I knew you, because we were all we had,
right?
We defended one another regardless. But once integration took place and we're in this melting pot, those things don't exist to the same level. You have small pockets of it, but it's nowhere near the same. And so it's like we gained access to all these different things. We had our first Black president. That's not to say we haven't made progress. And at the same time, we lost so much in other areas of our community. And so your question is, where do we start? There is no one answer. It's because there's so many different issues. It takes a multifaceted approach. Like you have the mental health component of it. You have the economic component of it. You have the leadership component. It's going to take a group of individuals to come together and really take themselves out of it and just be focused on the mission. And that's another issue I found in certain areas. You have people who want to be in leadership to elevate themselves. That's not what that's about.
Right.
And even within the Urban League, the best people I've seen is because they were focused on the mission and the work of the organization. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about what are we trying to accomplish? Who are we trying to help? And as long as you can get people in the room that are focused on that, we'll get to where we need to be.
I agree.
Why you smiling? Y'all can't see her. She's smiling. Why you smiling?
I'm smiling because I also feel that whether it's the lead, I think everyone wants to be a founder of something, right? I think there's this thing of, I'm going to say entrepreneurship is sexy. Entrepreneurship, whether it's business, starting a nonprofit organization or some kind of leadership / title. I think so many people are so stuck on
being the first.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny you mentioned that. They just had the State of Black America report launched, and we were just in D.C. a few weeks ago for the taping of that with TV One and Roland Martin and President Martin Morial. And one of the things they talked about as it relates to small businesses within the Black community, it's grown, I think, over the last year or so from 1.9 million to 2.7 million. But the revenues associated with those companies dropped from like 110,000 to around 54,000, something like that. And so what you have is, like you said, entrepreneurship is sexy. People that are leaving their 9-to-5s, starting their own business to basically replace their income, but they're not getting capacity because the majority of those businesses have one employee. And so until we find a systematic way, again, to take the ego out of it and find ways for different businesses to come together, strategically partner, grow capacity, and we'll have less businesses, but we'll have larger businesses that will continue to grow, continue to thrive. Because at the end of the day, the largest employers of Black people is Black businesses.
Right.
And so we need them to be successful in order for us to start to develop the type of wealth we need in our communities to get back to a place of equity. And it's not, again, it may take several generations. I don't know. But like you said, we just have to get to a starting point where we begin to see the trends, begin to see the progress. A lot of people like to point to home ownership. The issue with that is within our generation, we don't do things the way our parents did. Mm-hmm. We don't get married at the same age. We don't buy property at the same age. We just do things different. And that's not to say, and I'm sure depending on who you talk to, they feel like, oh, well, y'all didn't do it the way we did it. But there's things I can point to that, you know, because of the way y'all did it, that's why we're here now. So, but people don't want to hear that. And
like shots fired.
You know, they always want to say, oh, y'all lost, but how did we get lost? Who was raising us? Where were you? So
yeah, that's real.
But people don't want to say that.
Ooh, that's that nerve.
And yeah, so if everybody would just take accountability and stop trying to point the finger and focus on the solutions, then we would just be better off.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think, although we're making more money, I'll say if you're in corporate, although you're making more money, the money you're earning today doesn't stretch as far as it did back then, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Because I was in a Facebook group recently and we're talking about real estate and everything. I've always been fascinated by real estate. I just never participated in it. And I'm like, there's articles. If you haven't caught it right now, there's articles circulating how folks are educated, bachelor's, master's, professional degrees, educated, working/working poor. I use that loosely, but they're homeless, because they can't afford to pay for rent. Whether you would hear those stories, it's like, oh, well, they're in New York or they're in LA, they're in California, but now it's hitting the South. And I'm hearing those stories, in Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas. And it's like, I'm working, but at the end of the day, I got to go to a homeless shelter. And I'm like, shit's getting real. Like, so your homeless person is not your typical, it's not that bum on the corner street.
Yeah. And what you're, part of what you're talking about is underemployment. So you have the unemployment rates. We see those numbers. That's what everybody focuses on, but nobody really highlights underemployment. Mm. And it's something that even in my church, Reverend Cosby has begun to highlight, and he has focused prayer around it. You have people, like you said, have jobs, but they are jobs that pay below the poverty line or just above it. And even this invisible line is not necessarily the best indicator of what you need to take care of your day-to-day needs, right, depending on your situation.
Right.
And so that's where you have individuals that are working multiple jobs. And even those people who, like you said, may be in corporate and are making good money and it doesn't stretch as far, they may be sacrificing other things as it relates to their own mental well-being. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, you and I have had this conversation. I was working for Granger. This was like last summer. I was on a conference call and they were talking about like light bulbs and filters. And I just wanted to like bang my head against the wall because I was just like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And that's not to say Granger is a great company. If you want to go into corporate and if that's what you want to do, that's just not me. And so I would just caution individuals that get into the corporate space and it's not what you want to do or where, you really feel yourself growing, not just professionally, but as a person, as an individual, and you sacrifice self just for a paycheck. One of my friends used the term, dying inside. Mm-hmm. It's like, money, you need money. Money is not everything. And so just make sure that you're balancing that. And I have some peers who thrive in that space. Like, they love their job. They're making good money. They get promotions. That is excellent. We need people like that. But just make sure that's for you. That's all I'm saying.
I want to talk about what is the work you do with the police department?
So, yes, the Independent Police Oversight Board, that is a board of citizens that are selected either by the city councilman, the mayor, or they apply. And there's a whole list of boards and commissions you can get access to on the City of Houston website. And I was appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. And this particular board deals with use of force incidents or complaints that are brought against officers where they may have used force. Like, let's say they tried to arrest you for something and maybe they grabbed your arm and they bruised you or injured you in some way. Like
that grandma from last week, a week or two in Georgia, I think.
Right. Something like that. Or if an officer discharges their weapon. So, you know, we're in the age now of, you know, police shootings being videotaped, social media, etc. And so those cases come before different panels within the city of Houston. There's 4 of them. I'm on panel A. And so about once a month, I have to review cases where there's either alleged use of force or discharging of a weapon. We review the case to see if the officer operated within, you know, the guidelines in terms of the general orders that govern them. If there was something they did wrong, if we need to recommend some type of punitive measure, if there needs to be additional training, whatever that may be. And we submit that to the larger panel, which consists of the panel chairs. You have the council person that's over public safety, the police chief, Chief Acevedo, and Mayor Turner, and then they make a decision in terms of what that corrective action will be or if it's even necessary. And also, I've also participated on the body-worn camera audit team. So twice a year, they randomly pull 20 videos, and they're different lengths. There might be a video that's 30 seconds. There might be a video that's 3 hours. And we go in, look at all these videos, and again, just making sure that everything is done properly and that the citizens are being treated appropriately.
How long have you been serving in that capacity?
What year is this? I think it's like 2 years now. 2 years.
Have you seen improvements?
I have seen some improvements as it relates to some of the policies governing body cameras in terms of when they have to turn them on, the corrective actions if they don't turn them on. It's mandatory at this point. And the general orders, anybody can get access to those. You just have to, you know, ask for it.
Okay.
Yeah, at one point, I think they actually made it or posted it publicly, but then they no longer do that. But again, if you request it, you can still get access to it. But I would still say it's been minor improvements. There's no one thing I can just say that was just like a major accomplishment. And, you know, honestly, that board, it's limited in terms of the changes you can make. Because at the end of the day, it's only recommendations.
Right.
I can't make the City of Houston Police Department do anything. I can, you know, recommend different things. I can point out these things as issues, but it's based on leadership seeing that needs to happen, and then
it's a process too.
Right.
So
and understanding that the police union also plays a role in that, in terms of what they negotiate within that contract, what they allow to be put in place, governing their officers, et cetera, et cetera. So there's other things that kind of that are in place. Like you said, it is a process. And so understanding those different mechanisms and how you get to the point of where you're actually able to see the change is important as well.
And I mean, clearly we're speaking in general terms.
Right.
We're not talking about a specific incident. And I don't know where you stand, I guess, in regards to police brutality being videotaped and all that kind of stuff. But with your experience over the past couple of years, has it led to more understanding to some of the officers? I guess, how have you changed with this experience on your viewpoints? And what can be done to enhance a better relationship when it comes to the officers and the minority communities?
So there's like 4 questions. First, I'll say in terms of bettering relationships between officers and minority communities, I think there needs to be retraining of the entire police department, because in some instances you have individuals who have no exposure to minority communities, and their first exposure is when they're out in the field and they are trying to arrest an individual.
Okay.
And so whether or not they realize that there are implicit bias that are built into their decision making, and whatever they've been exposed to, whether it's VH1, whatever, that's their basis for understanding this particular demographic. And so without you spending time in those communities and genuinely developing relationships and having some type of cultural, not these made up cultural sensitivity training, but really spending time in Third Ward, in Sunnyside, in the Asian community, in the Hispanic, and spending time with these people in their space, showing them that, one, you're there to actually protect and serve, and taking time to get to know those people. It just creates an overall better environment. There's a better system of accountability, not just with the police department, but also with the citizens, because they'll be more trusting and more likely to lend aid, because you have the whole, don't snitch. And you see it all the time. I don't know if you've ever seen 48 Hours. But if people have relationships with the officers, and that's why you've had the suggestion about incentivizing paying officers to actually live in the neighborhoods they patrol, versus you living in Katy, but you over here in 5th Ward on patrol. 2 very different, it's worlds apart. So that's one thing. In terms of, trying to remember all these questions you asked.
Have you, I don't know if you changed your viewpoint, but I guess, have you got a better understanding?
In social media mind, do I think it's positive in terms of that, or
no? Do you have a better understanding of what police deal with? I don't know if you're
am I empathetic to it?
Yeah.
So I definitely have a better understanding. Police do deal with a lot, so I don't want to discount or make it seem like it's something small, because if you think about it, you have people out there talking crazy to you, getting in your face, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, you chose this profession. And so for me personally, I know I don't have the temperament to be a police officer. So that's not something I would pursue. And so if we're being honest, if you know you don't have that makeup, don't go into that profession just because you're trying to get the pay, the benefits. If you don't really want to serve, protect and serve, do not do that. So that's first and foremost. I have a great deal of respect for our police officers. I will say the majority of the cases I reviewed, police officers are actually out there doing their job. They're doing a good job. There's been some instances where I've reviewed cases and I'm just like, okay, this is completely out of line. And I can't get into specifics, but the majority, I'll still say, are doing what they're supposed to do. And that's not the ones we have an issue with, obviously. The issue that we have is the ones that are not doing what they're supposed to do. And they've been allowed to stay in these roles, in the police unions, being protected by their peers, people who don't want to say anything. You know, they talk about the blue wall of silence. And so I do have empathy for it. At the same time, you're held to a higher standard as a police officer. And I think that's okay. You're being paid to protect, you know, citizens. So you should be held to a higher standard. I do think they need more support as it relates to mental health. I think that's something that's not talked about enough in terms of, you know, giving them some type of support. Like I haven't seen any data in terms of what that would look like and what the cost associated with that. A lot of the talk is always about we need more officers. I don't think we need more officers. I think if you better train the ones we have and invest there, you'll see progress. And once we figure out the best way to do policing, then you can start to expand. But until you fix the issues we have in place, just adding more officers is not going to help. It's just going to exacerbate some of the issues that we have currently in place.
Because you're just adding officers to a broken system.
Yeah, and the system is broken. If people are honest, the system is broken because police, if you go all the way back, initially, we're talking about slavery, were used to round up slaves. Then we went through, you know, the 80s, the war on drugs. Then for a brief period, we had the community policing model. You had the broken window model. There's been all these different models. And then, you know, you had the militarized model of police. 'Cause, you know, they have all these different vehicles, this gear. It's like, you're not going into war zones. You're going into the community. Why do you need these things? And that's why you had President Obama trying to roll back a lot of those things. Then you see this new administration giving it right back, spending all this money. But it's like, for what? So I definitely have empathy for our officers. I appreciate the work they do. But like I said, there's some serious changes that need to be made. But, you know, you have to be realistic on both sides. And at the end of the day, if we focus on the people that are actually out here, like, committing violent crimes and trying to do harm to everyday citizens, that's where our energy needs to be, not, you know, nonviolent offenders. And that's why I think you're seeing this wave as it relates to criminal justice reform around decriminalization of around small trace amounts of marijuana and other drugs. So, yeah, we got a lot of work to do. I definitely think that the videotaping of officers is necessary. I actually just saw a case, one of my frat brothers and my Morehouse brother, attorney Lee Merritt, was representing a young lady who had made allegations against an officer of some type of sexual misconduct. And then the videotape was released, and Lee just issued a statement apologizing to that officer and his family that there was no wrongdoing. And the body camera showed that. So there is a group of officers, the ones that are doing their job, they don't have a problem with it, because in a lot of times it reveals that, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. You can see it. It's right here. You can hear how they talking to me. You can see it. I didn't do anything. But the issue comes into play where we see an officer gun and shoot down somebody in cold blood, and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
That's where the frustration lies. And that's where this groundswell is within our communities, because you're not placing any value on Black lives. And it's going to get to a point where people, and we're getting there, it's going to come to a head, and I don't know what's going to happen, but people are getting fed up. And so until we fix that component of it, until you have district attorneys who are going to prosecute officers for wrongdoing, for killing these people just because I thought he had a cell phone or I feared for my life. And that's one thing we really didn't talk about was the fear element. If you that afraid, you shouldn't be a police officer. And people don't know this, but like statistically, I want to say the majority of officers get shot or killed actually doing like routine traffic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, routine traffic stops. And so there's obviously a danger with that. And, you know, they just want to get home. But at the same time, there's always this, oh, I thought he had a phone, or oh, I thought he had something. We watched the tape. He wasn't even reaching for anything. And so when you have stuff like that, again, accountability, prosecuting these individuals to the fullest extent of the law, and actually showing that the system works both ways. But it's also the manner in which the law is written, because there's way too much leeway in terms of, on the part of the officer, I fear for my life, because there's no standard for fear. If he feels like he was in fear of it, you can't, there's no way to gauge that. And so that's where some things need to be repaired.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. And we didn't even touch on all of it. It is a lot. And I guess the biggest thing I've learned serving on that panel, or one of the things I should say, it's not just our officers, it's some of our everyday citizens. Some of the people I serve with on this panel, the manner in which they think and view things is just very out of touch. Mm-hmm. Because in the few times where there is some wrongdoing, you have people in this room that, their automatic response is they should have just listened to the officer. And it literally has nothing to do with what we just watched. But I'm sitting there trying to have this conversation with them. And so when you see that, and that's why I go back to, as a country, it's not just, the different systems. It's not just the police force. You have everyday people who just completely swear by certain entities and they can do no wrongdoing. And that's not the case. You have good and bad with everything. And people just need to acknowledge that and just take things at face value. Like when something is wrong, it's wrong. Stop trying to make excuses for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're going to give me hype.
Thanks for enlightening us. Oh, man. You've done a lot of work. So what do you want your legacy to be?
My legacy? That's a strong question. My legacy. I think for me, my legacy would just be one of family and service. And that whenever the good Lord does call me home, that, my neighborhood, my community, my people are better, and this world is better for me being here. I guess that is what I hope to leave behind for my daughter. I'm trying to teach her those things now. My nephews, my nieces, we have all these little kids running around in the family. So just making sure that I'm a good example for them, but just really stressing family and service. That's really, as I get older, I'm only, but the things that I'm understanding that really have true value. So yeah, I guess, yeah.
All right, family and service. So last question, or second to last question.
Okay.
What action item can you give us that we need to implement in our life today?
Action item you need to implement in your life today. I guess it'll be two parts. One is you got to do something. And what I mean by this, and I've been saying this for years, it's kind of like my rally call. You can't just go to work, live your existence, and go home. Mm-hmm. And there was a period where I did that. That's not okay. there's way too many different things that need to be fixed in this country, in our communities, that you can do something. You can mentor a kid. You can, go help out with this organization, go volunteer your time. You need to commit yourself and do something on a consistent basis every week to help move us forward and get us closer to where we need to be. That is a must. So that's the one action item. The second thing would be balance. And this is something that my father has kind of preached to me. One of the two things I should say he's preached to me since coming home from school is just being balanced in life. So understanding that whatever that looks like for you, whether, for me, it's faith, my family, community, whatever I'm doing professionally, and just balancing those things appropriately. Understanding that, work is not going anywhere. If you're supposed to get off at 5, I appreciate the grind, I appreciate the hustle, but sometimes just like leave that there. It's going to be there Monday when you get back. Trust me, it's not going anywhere. Go see your grandma. Go play with your kids. Like, just really appreciate those things in life. And trust me, you'll be better for it. And you will find a way to still get the work done. And you'll have more energy to do the work. And that's something I've kind of had to learn over the years in terms of balancing community, profession, family, faith, all those different things. And I'm still doing that. I haven't perfected it just yet. I've gotten very good at it, but it's an ongoing process. And so those two things, make sure you're getting out here doing something, get active so you can make a difference and just balance.
All right. And how can people get in contact with you?
There's so many different ways. I'm on pretty much all the social media mediums. I have a Snapchat. I haven't used that in like months. I have a Twitter. I haven't used that in a while. I mean, if you send me a message, I would see it. The two things, I should say 3 things, social media wise, I'm probably on the most would be LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And since the campaign, I now have 2 Instagrams, 2 Facebooks. Well, I have a Facebook page and a Facebook profile, I guess. Mm-hmm. So you can find me on there, Ray, RAY_Shack, SHACK. That's probably the easiest one. And then you can, get connected to my Facebook and all that from there. You can check out radio show I have. It's Agents of Change. That's every Monday from 5 to 6 on SynergyRadioNetwork.com. We talk about politics, social issues, cultural issues, pretty much whatever I want to talk about. But it's all in an effort to spark young people, young professionals out there to get active and do something, whether it's starting their business, doing something in the community. Also have a TV show that airs every Monday now, channel 15.8. You can also check it out on Facebook and YouTube called Fresh Perspective, where we work to bring people together across the African diaspora, focusing primarily on African Americans and the African population, talking about politics, civics, and just different things to dispel the myths amongst our communities to bring us closer. What else I got going on? I think that's the main 2 things. But yeah, Facebook, Instagram, Ray Shackelford, SHACKELFORD. Got the website, RayShackelford.com.
What?
You're still going to see right now a lot of campaign stuff. We're about to repurpose that, even though I may run for office again, but that hasn't been decided. Stay tuned. We're going to pray. Jesus is going to tell me. But yeah, definitely hit me up. Message me. Don't slide in the DMs and be creepy or anything like that. But, reach out to me. We can connect, do some work, do some good things in the community.
Absolutely. We're definitely going to have all of those links and handles in the show notes.
Yes.
As well as the TV show and the radio show. I actually forgot about that. I don't know how, but...
I mean, we're going to do a whole nother episode. We just won't wait a year to do it.
I can't keep up. Well, you know where I stay, so just...
I do. I know your security guard now. I do.
All right, everyone. Ray, you know I love you. Appreciate you. Love your mind, your contribution. I look up to you. I look forward to following your success. And y'all make sure y'all follow this brother. Remember, I believe in you, and a personal connection leads to an influential network. Thanks for networking with Michelle.